Hello, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Welcome to Talk About It Tuesday, where we have conversations about the messy middle of life in service of our healing, strengthening our leadership skills, and just living our best life. Today, we're talking about something very important, which is lightening your load and putting yourself first. And I could not be more thrilled to have Kristy Wallace as my guest today. She is the CEO of Ellevate Network, and she and I have built a beautiful relationship over the past couple of years, and I'm just excited for you to get to know her and her beautiful leadership style and just her beautiful soul. So thank you for joining me today. And here she is. Hello, Kristy. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to bring you on. So excited. On this sunny day in New York. And Chandra's so excited to have you here. Chandra's going to be our guest in a few weeks. Hello, Kristy.
Oh, how are you doing?
Oh my God, I'm so good. I'm so excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here too. Thanks for having me.
Oh my God, thank you for coming on this platform and having this conversation. I love having these deep conversations with people that have so much to say and are so willing to share their truth and their vulnerability because I think that that's where people get so much value. So thank you for being willing to share yourself with this beautiful audience.
Of course. Let's dive in. I'm excited for this.
Yes, yes. So first of all, before you came on, I was saying how you're the CEO of Ellevate and all this great stuff. But what I want to do is hand it over to you to share a little bit about like who you are, like where you come from, like what has made you like who you are at at your soul level, and we'll talk about like what you do and all that good stuff. But I just want the audience to learn a little bit more about you.
Oh goodness, how far back should I go?
You were born in no wherever you went so far. I think a way to think about it is like what are those aspects about your life that shaped who you are? Maybe another way to think about it.
Yeah, so I would say things that, this is gonna be fun. Things that shape who I am. Well, I'm a twin, which is amazing. And part of what makes it so amazing is that we are so complementary and yet so different. So my twin sister Katie is a middle school special ed teacher in a very low income school district. And so she's been in the same school for 20 plus years, such passion for her students, for the work that she does. And my mom always says she's like the country mouse and I'm the city mouse, because then I was working for startups and tech companies in New York City. And so it's so different. And yet we continue to lean on each other all the time and learn from each other. And I think that is kind of this basis of diversity of thought and diversity of our network and our communities that are so important. We continue to learn from each other everywhere. But my dad was an entrepreneur. He's a dentist. And so I worked in his office growing up and I waitressed. And so again, like really have this understanding of this entrepreneur community earlier in my career, which now leading and growing Ellevate has come in handy. And my mom is one of the strongest people I know. She got her doctorate while she had 4 kids and she was teaching. She was working full time. So definitely she was an inspiration. She ended up being dean of nursing at a local community college. So, when you think about kind of what are those early influences, this like strong mom, entrepreneurial dad, a twin sister who is just so different and yet complementary and amazing. And then that, I think was this foundation that led to a lot of who I've become as an adult. I went to Villanova. I have to shout that out because I'm a huge Villanova fan. But when I was at Villanova, I was an English and sociology double major, and my English senior thesis was all on The Handmaid's Tale and just the role of women and the control of women and their bodies and identities. And then my sociology senior thesis was all on the sexual revolution and the birth control pill and like the impact on society and the workplace. And so at that time, if you had asked me, are you all about helping women, believing in equity and equality, and creating change. And I probably would not have identified that way or even thought about it. But you see the topics and the themes that I gravitated to early on definitely came to play, 20 plus years later in my career.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. So I'm curious then, like, given, right, that's what you wrote about in school, in your schooling, like, do you remember where your passion for like equality for women, all of that, like where it started from? Like, did it come from like conversations you had with parents? Like, was it personal experience of being pushed down in any way? Like, where did it come from?
I don't know. I mean, I always, my parents were always incredibly supportive. I'd say that my type A personality did not happen overnight. It has been with me since the beginning of time. So growing up, I was always, wanted to be president of this organization and involved in that organization, and did my community service hours like way ahead of schedule. I mean, I love to be busy. I love to be involved. I love to take on leadership roles. And my parents and the community in which I existed in like really supported that. And so, yeah, I would say where, this more defining moment was really a teacher I had at Villanova, Dr. Hicks, who is now the chair of the department, and I'm still in touch with her. And she did a lot of classes around, feminism and literature, around science fiction. She had a great science fiction class. And so what I think, things I had taken for granted in my own life, which many of us do, we don't always recognize the privileges that we have. Things that I had taken for granted around the opportunities I had, that, my voice would be heard in my family. Within her courses, it really helped to center me on the fact that that is not a shared reality. And that there's a lot of themes to explore there, and a lot of, inequities. And so it was a great way to kind of delve into those topics. So kudos to teachers. I know they've been working hard these past couple of years, but dive into those topics in a more thoughtful way. Start to open my mind to really ask questions, to think. And then, I didn't go into, field, focused on women and equality right away. I spent 15 years in different fields, but then had that experience as a woman in the workplace, which was very eye-opening in many ways. As a woman in finance initially, very male-dominated industry, then a woman in tech, where I was one of the only women on the senior leadership team, a mom, what it's like to become a mom in those situations, where it's, the 12-hour work days and the different sort of priorities and expectations. And so along the way, it just, I think, further refined and solidified why this work is so important, why there's still so much work to be done. And that was really my purpose in life.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, I'm wondering, because like what I'm hearing is like that, growing up, you kind of felt your own power. Like you knew what it was to like speak your voice and be heard and seen. And so that's what I'm sensing. And then when you entered workforces where that wasn't so, like, how did you, I'm just like if you could go back in time a little bit, like, what was your reaction? Like, were you pissed off? Were you just like playing the game? Like, how did you navigate those situations? Like knowing how solid you were in yourself.
I think, well, I would say, there's also the aspect of power. I was near my career. I didn't maybe know to question some situations. I didn't know, certainly, I hadn't been part of a network or community that could talk me through that and support that. The internet was still new, so there wasn't also as much information out there around what was acceptable or not. But I would say, part of it is is especially as you're starting out your career and you don't know to question certain things. In hindsight now, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that happened. But at the time, maybe I didn't question it, or maybe it was just acceptance. I think unfortunately we accept scenarios that aren't okay, or we shouldn't, because we don't think we have the voice or the strength or the power to not accept it, to fight back. And unfortunately, that is reality for many women in the workplace too. You're relying on that job. You're relying on, maybe that income and support. And like, that's become, really a rallying cry around the, access to power and who controls power, and how that will, keep us from achieving equity and equality when, our, family eating or our own personal future is on the line to speak out. And how do we kind of reshape that and provide more support to those that need it, who need to have their voices heard.
Yeah, and it's like, and we fast forward, because like this idea of like, I didn't know that like I should question these things, or like, right? Like, I think that's so many people's stories. It's just like, oh, this just must be the way it is, and now we're in like this whole other era, like of everything getting like upheavaled, right? It's like, oh no, that's not okay. That's not okay. And so now you're having this pushback to say like we have to change the way that we're operating, change the kinds of questions that we're asking, standing up and using our voice. And so just kind of jumping forward into your role now as a CEO of Ellevate Network, which is all about empowering women, supporting women, providing community, and making sure women have access to places of power. Like, what do you think right now is like the biggest aha for you in terms of what women are currently experiencing in this new awareness raising like moment of time?
I mean, there's so many ahas, but because it is, I think that there's a couple of themes that really stand out to me. One, in no particular order, because they're all important. So one is I've talked a lot about, I'm a lot bit introverted, just kind of definitely need my space and my time. And someone had made a comment to me that it's really easy to hide online. That is very loaded, and there's many implications to that. But in this context, I think when we are talking about you're not in the office and stopping by people's desks and popping into conference rooms and having meetings, it can be very easy in this virtual landscape to hide, to not be as present. And there's been a lot of discussion around the impact of the virtual landscape on women, and particularly as we move back to a hybrid type work environment, and who will be able to go to the office or who wants to go to the office, what interactions haven't been happening the past 2-3 years. How does the lack of connection to a manager, to someone senior in the organization, or to those who have kind of the power and the access, how is that impacting us? And I think about that myself as a leader, because I am, again, more introverted, and so I'm not as doing as good of a job reaching out to my team and talking to them, and I have to be really intentional about that. So I think one is, we've seen during COVID and the pandemic and the virtual landscape, maybe women disappearing from that kind of workplace dynamic and relationship building. Definitely we've seen the impact on just wearing many hats. I'm a mom of three little kids, so I had to wear a leader hat and a friend hat and a caregiver hat and a teacher hat and all of these different hats, and there was no hat left for me and for my own well-being and supporting myself, and so that's been really difficult. There's again lots of commentary on just the weight of this time period on women, and their ability to progress forward, their ability to support themselves alongside all of the other work and hats that they have. But the third thing that I'm really hopeful for about this period is we've seen so many of the structures and systems within the workplace really kind of laid bare and shattered in some cases, where my hope and my belief is that we will not go back to the way that we were. I mean, we have workplaces and structures that were created by white men, for white men who had, a partner at home who took care of everything. And those systems and structures no longer work. So we need to build back differently. We need to change that. And I'm hopeful that will happen. One, because we have some unbelievably amazing women in listening to this today, in the Ellevate community, in the workforce, who are going to fight for that. Two, we have strong communities that will band together, both within their workforce and more broadly, to create systemic change, to raise their voices, to advocate for that. And three, we have more power. We're talking about the Great Resignation. We're talking about, finding that workplace that supports you, and finding a place where you have purpose, where you're seen, where you're heard. And so between those things, there's a lot happening right now where I believe we're going to be in a very different place. It can be discouraging when we talk about full equity in the workplace because we have so far to go and it seems progress is so incredibly slow. But this will be a time of great, I think, reckoning and progress. And I'm hopeful. I have such belief in, the women we surround ourselves with and our allies and advocates and conscious leaders who really share this vision.
I couldn't agree more. I definitely, I'm feeling good. Like, because you can't unsee what you see, right? Like at this point. And Charmed and Gray is saying that you inspire me, Kristy. Yes, I agree. And actually, I want to take a quick pause on, you kind of self-identify as an introverted leader. And, in working with a lot of individuals, right, and seeing what gets rewarded in this society and culture, right, is like all the blah, like some of that outgoing energy. And so I'm curious what it's been like for you in your leadership style, in a world that kind of rewards the extroverted personality. Like, how has that been for you in terms of honoring your truth and your leadership style when maybe there's not as many examples of that around you? I'd love to hear that because I think, especially when I think about my clients that also identify as introverted, it can be a real challenge.
It can. There's a story earlier in my career where as I said, I was on the senior leadership team of an organization, and I worked really hard to get there, and I should have been there, and yet still didn't feel confident and comfortable in my voice and in speaking out. So we would have these leadership team meetings, and I would go back to my desk and type a note to my boss, who was the CEO, and be like, here's what I think we should do, and here's this idea, and here's this idea, because I felt much more comfortable just being able to share it in that context. And then one day he came up and was like, I will not read these emails anymore. No more. Like, you've got great ideas. You have to speak up. You have to share them and in the meetings and have ownership over them and have your voice heard. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that he did that he, really sponsored me in that way. And also within the meetings made space for me to, turn to me and say, okay, Kristy, what do you think? But I had to find a way to do that was comfortable for me, right? It's not comfortable for me to kind of speak over people and jarring to kind of get through the noise. And, and then if you've been in some of those meetings, everyone wants to have their voice heard. Everyone, needs to put in their 2 cents. So that I didn't want to compete with all of that. But then it was finding, well, what are the entry points? What are the ways in which I can speak up and become comfortable with that in my own way? And I think that doesn't always, especially for me, happen alone. It's about having the people in the room that support you in that and see you for, the unique aspects that you bring to that table and how they can help amplify that. So that's just a story from earlier in my career, but now as a leader, it's interesting. I mean, it's hard. Like leading, first off, leading any company, but especially a company such as ours that's so purpose-driven, during the pandemic is really hard. Leading a team, any type of situation like that has been really hard. And it's hard on so many levels. It's hard because you don't have clarity on what's happening in the world. How do you have that bigger vision that, 18 months, 5 years out, whatever that is, when you don't know what that is and you're terrified yourself. Second is you're likely not supporting yourself, getting what you need, your cup, because you're doing it for everybody else. It is hard because your employees, really need you, and they're going through this time in many different ways, whether they're, working caregivers or sheltering in place alone. There's a lot happening in our world that impacts people on a very personal level. And if we're going to redefine the workplace, then we have to be accepting of the whole person, and not just expect them to show up and just be, their name and title in the Zoom, but who are they really, and how do you best create a place to support them? We were supporting our community. I started leading a roundtable for our executive community pretty much the first week of the pandemic. And it was this weekly convening where we were sharing expertise. It was a safe space to really talk about what we were going through. And, collectively it was, I don't know how to set boundaries. I'm trying to, reassure my team. I'm trying to support the employees who are going through a myriad of different experiences. And it's a lot of unknowns. But then in the midst of all of that, for me, what was really hard is that everyone's kind of looking at you for the answers. Like we all wanted some certainty during that time. And so they looked to their boss or their leader for what is that certainty? Like, help me feel more comfortable that there's, safety and security in this world and in our situation. And it's hard to provide that when you don't always feel that yourself. So as an introvert, I had to really just lean into, some one-on-one conversations, relationship building, being really vulnerable and transparent. This is kind of what I'm thinking. This is what I'm going through. This is what I know everyone else is going through. This is, what we can do together. And I think believing in yourself, which means believing in not so much you're going to make 100% the right decisions or you're going to be the most amazing leader and do everything right. It's just believing in yourself that when you fail, because you likely will, you know how to get back up, that you're resilient, that you can continue moving forward, and that you're surrounded by people in your company, in your own network, and networks like Ellevate that can support you in that and help you move forward.
It's it's like what you're saying, and it's making me think of, and I think we talked about this, like I'm reading the Book of Joy, and it's about like when one of the concepts in there is like when you feel like you're part of something bigger, when it's not just you, right? When it's like all these other people are dealing with similar things, then it kind of gives you the strength. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say. It's like, yes, you believe in yourself, and that that there's this whole community that will help you rise back up if you fall or if you make mistakes. Am I kind of hearing that right? Is that how you see it?
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I mentioned the executive roundtables, and we've been doing that for, executives and rising leaders, business owners. But the magic of that is feeling less alone. Being this time on so many levels has felt really isolating, and not just because of the pandemic, but because we're leading in different times, living in different times, and to feel that you're not alone, that others are going through it, or they had gone through it, or they have advice to share, they just have like camaraderie and yes, I hear you, I see you, I'm dealing with that too, is really reassuring. Because especially as a leader, we tend just put everything on our own shoulders and feel like we have to, carry it alone, right? Kind of we were talking about in Canto, and that idea of, okay, I'm gonna keep putting things on my shoulders and keep trudging on, but yet I'm crumbling inside. And finding that space, for everyone who's watching, I mean, just find your squad who you can talk to about these things, you can get advice, you can just have a there as something different. But again, we're getting through it together. We're learning, we're growing. I'm not the leader today that I was 3 years ago, and I'm much better for it. We're creating more change. I think our the way we look at problems and how we solve them is shifting. More human or customer-centered approach, really deeper understanding of what we as a society need, and a deeper purpose around that, a drive to really create change, because we've kind of all been in it together.
And you talked about vulnerability and transparency as part of like this journey of leadership and like what you've had to do. And I'd love if you could share a little bit more about like what that means for you, because I think that the predominant leadership paradigm like doesn't leave room for that, right? And it's like leaders are supposed to have all the answers, and I think it also makes me think of, right, like that people are looking to leaders for that because they've been trained to think that it's the leaders that have all the answers, which is baloney crap, right? And that's like the whole disempowerment, piece of it all. But I'm curious for you, like, what is most difficult for you to be vulnerable and transparent about, like as the head of your organization, or even the head of your household, like whatever realm you want to be in with that,
Yeah, well, yes. So we want leaders to have all the answers. If you were to think about, just the times we're living in, if, I don't know, Fauci or, president or whomever is like, I'm sorry, folks, I have no idea. Like, not really sure. Like that, we all, want to feel that there is someone who has the answers and has that vision of how we're to move forward. We're all, I think, dealing with our own insecurities and fear, and those are tough emotions. And so we want that kind of that hope and that vision, that strength. And that's a lot of what is on leaders, to, be able to say, okay, it's like steering the ship, all right, we're in a big storm, but I know the direction, I'm going to help us get through it. And so for me, I would say the hardest thing is I don't admit that enough. I mean, I am honest with my team, and I'm, definitely I'm transparent, I'm vulnerable, but I still, I think, hold back. And it's the same in my family, where it's like, sure, I can take that on. Oh, you want me to do something? Sure, no problem. It's just like, I can do it. I can do it, because you don't want to admit that you've hit your limit. You can't do it. And so it's more about asking for help, which for me, I'm not always good at. And people ask me all the time. It's the one thing I want to change is everyone's like, what can I do for you? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll think about it. If I need something, I'll let you know. And myself, I'm like, no, I need to ask for help. I need to have my list and be like, well, if you have time, here are the 3 things I really need. And it's, in my family too, it's just being able to ask for help and say, I can't do this. I need help, or I can do this, but it's at the expense of something else, my own time, my own needs, whatever that is. And that's the same as a leader is being able to, ask your team who's there to support you, and it helps to make you the leader you are, being able to ask your community, your customers for help. And that's where I think we struggle, because if you have to ask for help, is that a sign of weakness? Is it a sign you can't do it yourself? Like, what will people think? But inherently, I believe in the goodness of humans. and we want to help each other. We want to support one another. And being able to ask for that help, to acknowledge that, is a really powerful tool.
Yeah, and I want to dive into this a little bit. And also before that, I just want to honor we have some powerhouse women joining us with Sarah Hadman at the Now and Karen Ortiz, who's a judge, and Sylvia, who started the Bond magazine, which is all about women's stories. So we got some really amazing people I know here to hear what you have to say. And I just want to say to them, if you guys have any questions, by all means, put them in the chat. But in terms of this, like asking for support as a sign or a weakness, now, I'd love to dig into this because I think that, and Meeting Your Magic, we got Kiara. She left corporate to start her own thing in the past few months. She's a badass woman too, entrepreneur doing amazing things. When I think about the earliest parts of my life, right, that I learned at a pretty young age to make my problems small because I wasn't necessarily in environments where I could be given what I necessarily needed. So it was very hard for me to get support. I mean, even now it's a struggle, like to honor, to even know what I need, and then to be discerning about who do I reach out for, what am I asking for, and whether that's your experience or other people's experience. I think we learn it and we get messages, we're conditioned about what strength looks like, and we've had some examples that aren't necessarily healthy, right? The thing that pops into mind is like Jackie Kennedy when her husband died, right? And it's like, and that's the model? Like, no, break down, girl. Like, this is gonna happen. So I'm curious for you, your journey with asking for support and acknowledging it as a strength versus a weakness. Like, what has that looked like for you? And you may very much be in the middle of it, as you were kind of alluding to, like it's a journey. But if we could just get the real talk on that.
Well, I want to go back to you for a second because you said you learned very early on to make your problems small. What does that mean to you?
To me, it is like if I can do it on my own, do it on my own. And that was very much also encouraged by, the examples that I had in my life. Like, you don't ask for support, you don't ask for help, and I got those messages very directly and indirectly. And making them small, meaning like almost just not even acknowledging that it's a thing and just burying the hard stuff and moving it forward and moving it forward. That's what it was for me.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you for that, and thank you for sharing that. But I think this is a very nuanced conversation, right? Mm-hmm. Because when I think about my kids, for example, I often am saying, solve your own problems. It's like, okay, and mm-hmm. not say, I'm not here to support you, and if you need something, absolutely. But I also want them to learn how to solve your own problems. Like, how do you resolve the fight you and your sister are in? How do you figure out, how to share or find something to wear today or whatever that is. And to me, and I'm processing this all as we're speaking, so bear with me, but
yeah.
To me, it's about, cultivating that child who is resilient and able to solve problems and figure it out and problem solve and all that. And then in the workplace, we oftentimes look for employees that can solve their own problems. And again, it's know when to ask for help. If you need something, and I, as a leader, I'm always like, if you need help, ask for it. Like, we're here to help you. You also want someone to be able to take a project or goal and figure out how to solve for that, and what is the answer. Or I hit a roadblock, how do I overcome that roadblock? And where I think this goes like sideways is when it becomes so isolating that it's you're the only one who can solve your own problems, and you just need to sit with them yourself and figure it out, and it's all on you. And there has to be a conversation around, like, how are we able to work that muscle of, solving it or overcoming and thinking of it differently. And there's beauty in the ways we each might approach that differently. But then also being able to ask for help, being able to say, I can't solve this, or maybe I just don't have the bandwidth, or maybe I need inspiration, or like, how do you ask for help? And that's, I don't know if I know how to do that. Like, I honestly don't know if I would know how to, say, oh, hey team, I'm trying I'm trying to think up our vision for the next 2 years. That's probably not a great example, but bear with me. And I'm uninspired. Like, how do I do that? And so if you were to go to someone and say that, your team, the fear is that they're like, whoa, doesn't know how to solve this, doesn't have the answers, like jump ship, or losing confidence. And so then I think that there becomes this misnomer that if we ask for help, that is a sign of weakness. Ask for help. Because we've now been conditioned from early to solve your own problems. These great workers, and certainly I was coming up the ranks, they will solve their own problems, they'll figure it out, they'll keep moving forward. So there has to be, a bigger discussion around how do we ask for help, and conversely, how do we be colleagues and friends and peers who see someone who needs help, who can just jump in and say, okay, I'm helping, and this is like how I'm going to help. And it does feel that as soon as you ask, that it means you're not capable, and that's not what it means. It doesn't mean you're not capable. It means we can't all go it alone. The leader of a company isn't a singular only spot, right? You can't do it alone. You need your team and your advisors and your friends and your peers, but I feel like we create such silos in workforce that you're up on this pedestal, and everyone says it's really lonely being a leader, and it is, because we feel that it's all on us, all on us to solve, and we should lean into asking for help more.
It's such an important, this topic, right, is just like, as you're going into it, right, it is nuance, and it is because you can get into that, yes, building independence and trusting yourself and giving yourself space to figure things out, and then but it can become toxic to set, right, to be like, well, where's the line, right, between independence and actually I'm in over my head, or actually it would be easier to solve with, with a cohort or colleagues, or with, people that can help me think through this or process it or whatever. And it kind of makes me think, because I talk to my clients about this too, which is like, to me, it is a big way of building trust, but we don't always see it that way, right? Like, because if, you just even think of some of your friend relationships, right? If you are constantly being like, oh my God, I'm struggling, and then they're kind of being helpful, but then they never reciprocate, like, it makes you feel a certain way. And I think that, when you kind of look at the building blocks of trust, which actually Brene Brown does this very well, you can say, oh, because it can be really hard to pinpoint, oh, like, it's hard to trust because you're never acting like nothing's wrong. You're acting like you never need any help. And that is not, that cannot be true, right?
I kind of like a mastermind group with other CEOs, and it's interesting as we're talking about this, I'm thinking, the whole premise, right, the whole structure is, here's what's going great, and here's kind of what's not, or what I'm struggling with. And within that context, it's about, asking for help or for advice, saying like, this is great, but like, I'm struggling with this aspect. And it took us a long time to build that trust. And you could see it where the first couple of months, like, the thing someone was struggling with was always, I don't want to say small, but it was safe. It was a safe. And then as we built deeper trust and we went deeper, the things that we shared were much more vulnerable, much maybe harder to identify, but still things that we as leaders and individuals and humans were challenged by. And to be honest, it wasn't always just like, it's this workplace thing. It's this life thing. It's this like bigger thing that's kind of across so many parts of how we live and exist. And for me, you know, one of the hardest things about that too was to be able to say the same thing like 2 months in a row. Because like, well, if I said it last month, then I should have solved it by now. And I would go into those meetings with such anxiety of like, what are they going to think? Solve this yet? It's been a month. But again, like we're putting a lot of that on ourselves. I don't think anyone in that room, you know, saw it that way. But we are defined by these constructs and these in preconceived notions of what, you know, leaders should be able to navigate and how quickly they should solve those problems, and you know, all of that, where we need to make space to admit that it's not that easy.
Yeah, it's like you're talking about, right? Like judgment, especially women judging women, is like rampant, and the shaming, and like there's so much projection that happens. And I think that also, like, how can we be aware of modeling, right? What it looks like to say I need support, even if, you know, you're not always getting the kind of response you want. And I think that's part of the discomfort of this, because it's a learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to honor that, like, there's all these comments. I just want to say, Sylvia is saying that I tell my new hires that asking for help is a strength to encourage them to ask. And then Karen is saying it's important to get outside views and inputs. If, for example, making decisions, you are fully seeing, acknowledging the context. And she talks about how she asks other judges for their thoughts, kind of like a mini Davos. And then Karen's also asking, like, have you ever regretted asking someone for help? That's a good question. Like,
I don't know. That is a great question. Because I have, but I think for the wrong reasons. You know, maybe I regretted it because I, you know, saw myself as being too vulnerable or admitting a weakness, where it's you sort of maybe ask for help and the next day you're like, oh gosh, what should I have said that to them? Like, what do they do with that information, or what will they think? And it's always been better that I shared or that I asked for help. And again, I think that regret comes from my own, you know, feeling like I have to solve for everything myself.
Yeah, it's like the vulnerability hangover, right? It's like, oh shit, I shouldn't have asked for help. No, like I putting myself out there.
Like, what's the downside? Like, what is the downside? And realistically, you know, if someone were to come to you and say, you know, if it's an employee or a friend, like, yeah, I you know, even if it's, I mean, I'm actually thinking of a real story that happened where I had someone on my team who, and this is years ago, but didn't know Excel, right? Didn't know how to use some Excel, and literally spent a day like trying to figure out how to, you know, get this data analysis, where I'm like, well, if you just asked me, I could have shown you in 2 seconds. Like, there's no weakness in not knowing, like, ask for help. So it's from the smallest thing to the biggest thing. There's just times when maybe you'll solve the problem faster. You will, you know, be able to collaborate with someone else. You will get a different perspective. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to it. And, you know, as we think about the whole funnel, maybe for our team, where it's like, here is a project I want you to work on, and, you know, identify the problem, figure out the solution, and implement it. There's nothing that we work into that model that says ask for help. You know, it's like, figure out the problem, what do you need help on? You know, figure out the solution, what do you need help on? Implement it, what do you need help on? Because again, we can't do it all. You know, and I think especially as women, like, that is, I mean, especially for me, I will say for me, there are so many times over the past couple of years, I mean, my whole life, but definitely the past couple of years, that I should have asked for help, that I should have, you know, communicated. to my family or to my friends or to my workforce that I needed help. And it's each time we don't do that, we talk a lot about filling your cup, but I think it's like draining it more and draining more, and then you're just empty. And even say, and I'm sort of shifting a bit, but this is very personal. I need help because I honestly need an hour today for me, to take a walk or to read a book or something, because I can't in, these 24 hours of this day get all this stuff done. And yet not getting it done is weighing on me. It's causing me my own stress, my own anxiety, my feeling of failure maybe. So asking for help in all these situations where we need it. Like we need it, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that. And I think that we've just for years and years gotten this messaging that it's not okay, or that, you're kind of shamed when you do. And then you have something like, with the Olympian, why is her name escaping me? Gabby, is it right? Who was like, time's up. I need a break. This isn't going to happen. Like, because this is what is in my best interest. And I think you just saw this overwhelming support. Be like, yes, thank you. Yes, it is okay to say enough is enough. And I need me time, because I'm playing the long game here, and that requires filling my cup and all that stuff. And it makes me think too, even like I remember in my career, a colleague who was, Simone Biles. Thank you. Yes. I knew it. I was like, Gabby, wait, no, that's all right. Where I had a female, she was kind of my boss at the time. She was like, yeah, don't ask questions. Like, don't admit that you don't know in those meetings. And that was her way, right? That was her way. But it wasn't my way. And I think part of all of this is coming back to really being firm in your truth and firm in understanding who you are, and being like, even if somebody else is going to shame me for asking for support, right? It's about having your own boundaries and not letting that, I think, impact you, so that you can see there's another way of living. There's another way of doing things that isn't modeled as predominantly as we need.
Well, and that's also back to the times in which we're living right now, where virtual landscape, how do you ask for help when, again, you maybe can't stop by someone's desk and you're like, oh, hey, can you just show me this real quick? Many of us feel that, we have to put time on someone's calendar, or, schedule something. It's got to be 30 minutes, or, we live in these kind of blocked, siloed, calendar-driven times where we can't just pick up the phone and say, oh, hey, I have a quick question. Can you answer this for me? You're sending Slacks and waiting for someone to respond. And how does that translated maybe in written communication versus being able to, again, stop by someone's desk and ask them? And modeling that as leaders and as managers. And I understand what you're saying about your old manager. I mean, there was definitely this time period, and we've talked about the Queen Bee, we've talked about, getting your seat at the table, and how the workforce was for all of time for women who are moving the way up the ranks. And that's got to change. I mean, it is changing, right? And we know that because this is the time when it has to change. We have to model different behaviors and have leaders and managers and peers who are saying it's okay to ask for help. And it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to sometimes need to prioritize family over work, or to wear multiple hats and to be honest about that. It's okay to bring your full self to work. And the more we see and acknowledge and recognize each other, the more that we're going to collectively create that workplace of the future where we can all succeed.
Yeah, and you said something, and I think what you're saying too in all of this, right, is giving ourselves space to even process, which is right a whole nother way of doing it, other than the kind of the masculine way that especially businesses operate, right? Which is this the productivity model, right? The efficiency model. And we're moving into this realm of like human issues need time and space. And as leaders, we need time and space to deal with people issues and to even identify what are the needs, to even do that analysis of like, yeah, what the hell do I need to even ask for support? And you need space to figure that out, you know? Um, so I'm curious, like coming back to this idea of like, you know, putting yourself first, of lightening your load, of saying, and I don't know what that means for you, like lightening your load, like this doing less, like prioritizing more, taking things off the plate. Like, what is it that you're hoping to be able to do this year to play the long game and to be a sustainable leader that can show up as you want to show up every day?
Yeah. Well, as you know, we started the year with all five of us having COVID. So I kind of went in thinking, okay, this is my year. I'm going to make it happen. And then I was back to homeschooling three children, and navigating all of that went with that. But so the first lesson I learned is that it doesn't have to be. I mean, it doesn't have to be hard to start. It doesn't have to be January 1st or January 15th. Start, and start small. It doesn't run the marathon. Like, what is that? Taking that first step, that first walk. And for me, I love setting these big goals for myself and then not accomplishing them because it's this big, hairy, audacious goal. And we know that in the workplace that you can set a goal, but you have to break it down into smaller milestones and smaller tasks. And oftentimes you're going to be outsourcing some of that. You're going to be asking some people for help. So it's in our own lives. What is that thing tomorrow? How do you make it a practice? How do you ask for help? And saying no. One of my colleagues, Marcella, got me a mug for the holidays that just says no on it. That no, my no guru, because I say yes to everything. And it's, so for me, it's really prioritizing me. And I don't do that. I prioritize everyone else. Want to be the best boss and leader and friend and parent and partner and all of those things. And I inherently put everyone's, needs before my own, but I know that is having an impact on me. So I just need to focus on me. And that's not a negative. That's not meaning I'm going to not do other things. It means that I understand that if I can, read for that book or take that walk or, see a friend or whatever it is that I need to sustain me and to help me, that I will be better and stronger in all the other areas of my life. And it's just about, I don't know what the word is because it's not selfish. It's not self-serving. It's it's just sustaining. It's loving.
Yeah, it's like it needs a reframe, right? Because of the way I think we think about putting ourselves first can be seen as selfish, or we interpret it as selfish, as opposed to the truth, which is like when we take care of ourselves first, we can serve better.
Yeah.
Like, and so it actually is the most selfless thing that we can do, because we know we can be of service better by honoring our needs first. Like,
and there's still a privilege in that too. I read all the big business gurus and I go to a cabin in the woods for every year and read all these books and oh, that's nice. I wish I had any ability to do that. But so for everyone here, I mean, we each have our own lives and experiences, and it's not about, I think it's about what works for you. And it, doesn't have to necessarily involve money or a bunch of time. It just has to involve you carving out that space. So I started, 5 minutes a day. I did a manifestation challenge heading into the year, which really just recentered me and gave me
Mm.
time to journal and to think, which I wasn't giving myself time to do. And ironically, it was I had to pay for something to create a structure for me to get my A in to say. So whatever it is, but it's
Yeah.
yeah, just feeling.
I mean, and to your point, absolutely, like the range of what it means to put yourself first. It could be as simple as not answering the phone from a family member that might trigger you in the moment, but saying, I'm just going to call them back when I'm actually in the headspace that I'm going to be able to deal with that, you know? Like, I'm sorry, what?
Or maybe never.
Or maybe not. Yeah, oh, but yes, but it doesn't have to be these monumental things of like I'm going to take a vacation and put me first for like 2 weeks. It's those daily choices where you, in my opinion, where you can honor what is in my best interest right now, and really just asking yourself, is it in my best interest to actually, skip out on this meeting and go for my walk? Actually, yes, it is. Which I hope is the case for your 1 o'clock.
I have an Ellevate executive roundtable, but we will be talking about how to find joy in work. So
Oh my gosh.
well,
What?
time actually that I consider filling my cup because I get to have these conversations that matter to me and learn from other people and kind of build those connections. So
Oh my God. I love that. Yes. Well, okay. So knowing, yes, we're at the top, we're coming to the top of the hour. You got another call. So I guess I'm going to ask 2 questions. And number one is like, did we leave anything on the table that you really want people to know about putting yourself first and lightening your load? And secondly, is there anything you want to share about Ellevate Network for those who might be interested in investigating if that community of support is right for them?
so did we leave anything on the table? I mean, I would just say, lean into your community. Uh, Failure is not a weakness. Asking for help is not a weakness. It's a strength. It's a sign that you are able to know what you need and to ask for that and to tap into the community and support networks you have. So lean into that support. I'm always here to support you. So please know that. And about Ellevate Network, check it out. It's a great community, the largest community of women in the workplace, where we're creating real and meaningful spaces for conversations just like this. For you to ask for help, for you to get that support, and for you to be the leader and change maker we know you are.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's been such a joy and honor to have you here. Thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, and sharing what you struggle with. I think to your point you made earlier, it helps us all feel less alone to know that like, you know, you also are dealing with the things that we're all dealing with, and are bold enough and courageous enough to name it. So thanks again for taking the time on this platform to share your beautiful stories and your leadership.
Well, thank you, and thanks everyone for joining us today for this conversation.
Yes. All right. More to come. And ciao for now. And I'm checking in on you later. Make sure you get that walk in. I'm going to be your accountability partner, whether you want it or not.
Later, so I have to anyway. But
Awesome. Okay, good. All right. We'll talk to you soon and have a great roundtable conversation.
Thanks.
Ciao for now.